What's up, everybody? How you doing on this fantastic day? I'm not going to pretend like it's fantastic. It really is fantastic. It's the question that I'm posing today is, can we really opt out of society? Do we really have the option, no pun intended, to opt out? And once in a while, I come across videos while I'm watching, various videos of people, and come across somebody who's, angry at the system. And many people who are angry at the system, and that can be expected with a crumbling infrastructure, and when we start to awaken and see the world around us for what it really is. And it can become a difficult endeavor to try and reconcile some of these discoveries that we make. And beautiful day out. A little bit overcast, but yeah, we we have these options to decide how much we want to put into society, how much we want to give, how much we want to put forth effort to change the things the way they are, the status quo, the paradigms. And amidst that, I think we get lost sometimes in the details. And what I mean by that is that I think we overlook many of the structures of society that are enduring or permanent. In other words, the idea that we can get over the rich and the poor, or that we can get over the haves and the have-nots, that we can get over the leaders and the followers, as if that perhaps may be something that humans should be doing, that we should all be equal. But when I look at the universal picture of things, there are always dominating forces within every archetype. I mean, there are larger planets, there are bigger people, smaller people, smarter people, dumber people. It's something that's not going to end. So the equality issue is going to only be resolved if we can actually find a way to all share the same ideals, and I don't know if that's possible. But we've been shoving each other's ideals down each other's throats for far too long now, and I think it's something that's probably inherent within mankind. It's one of our behavioral, something we can't break away from, and it's a pattern that we all have an ideal. We have to be idealists in order to look towards the future. And so in order to do that, that means we have to have an ideal of what we think a good future is. And so once we get past the idea of trying to prove ourselves or prove our theories to others, we find the common grounds, the things that we can agree on, and we settle for a compromise, I guess. And amidst all this, I guess what I'm saying is that there's going to be people in charge. There's going to be people taken advantage of. There's always going to be right and wrong going on in this world. But in order to deal with it appropriately, we can't try to just abolish it and change it, because we can only try to change ourselves. And to influence the environment around us, influence our children, and hope that it's a better future. And meanwhile, there's going to be these people taking advantage of the world. There's going to be these 0.01% that's exploiting everything. The Koch brothers, the Bilderberg group, all these different people who are running the show, as people say. And it's easy for people to get frustrated with that, because we feel like we're playing a game and we're being sucked into a system. We're slaves to the system. And so my conclusion is that the only way out is through mental alchemy, through changing the way that you view it. Because no amount of complaining is going to get rid of these people. They will always be around. And as long as we have any type of structure, there will be somebody to take advantage of it. What we have to do is instill values in our children in hopes that in the future, people will be frowned upon for doing the things that they do, the dishonest things. I thought about something the other day, I thought about how people talk about the good old days when a man's word was his bond, and I thought about this. I was like, why is it the good old days? Why do we look at this with nostalgia, as if honesty is something of the past? I mean, It's something that should just be the normal way of things, you know. Dishonesty only causes more dishonesty as we try to cover our tracks. So, you know, it's a tough world to live in with dishonest people, but I think that as long as we don't shame those, we need to shame people who are dishonest. We need to shame all of those who, you know, take advantage of others. And I think we do a pretty good job at it, but we can only do so much. And we're still pretty young, and we're new to this, all this awareness and awakening, as people call it, because only the information has really only been here, and I think that everybody knows this, the information has only been here as long as the internet has. Because it was very difficult for the average person to gather all these ideas together into one place and see the patterns as they emerge, as we can now with the internet. And it's an awesome thing, but people get caught up in the details too. And so really, in a nutshell, I think we need to concentrate on those things that we can change, and that's usually in our immediate environment and vicinity, but you know, we still have to stand up for what we see wrong. You know, if I feel that somebody's, you know, like I have you know, my opinions against GMOs and Monsanto, but at the same time I hold a little bit of rational thought about this, you know, that it's not I don't take it as far as to say that, you know, the whole idea of GMOs was to control people, or, you know, people are trying to make money, okay? This is the society we live in, and the ethics that go with making money sometimes are very poor. So when we start to look at it as these are individual people all just thinking, well, I just need to get mine, rather than thinking it's a giant conspiracy against everyone, we can start to see that 99.99% of the people are just like us and just want a good life, you know. And when we are suspect of those around us, I mean, it's easy to get carried away with it and assume everybody's bad. So, you know, those are the things that I consider. And here's another aspect of the whole thing that I think many people overlook. And I think that only because I'm basing that on my subjective experience that I overlooked as I was growing into myself, growing into my soul, my essence, and becoming a person that is confident, sure about myself, yet honest enough to know that I'm never going to be, you know, perfect. There's always going to be something to work on. In other words, the humility to know that we're always carrying on to something different. And I think that when we set our ideals to, to say that what we consider an ideal, this future that we think that what we think the future should be like, how we think people should act, is usually based on subjective opinion. And often it's also based on objectivity by looking at the situation and saying, well, this is what would make the most people happy, such as utilitarianism, you know. The idea with the, you know, whatever works the best for society. But then we have these ideals that, let's say, everything's going to be perfect, this utopia here on Earth. These are unrealistic goals. But there are people who would argue that no, it is realistic, that we really can have this utopia, that everyone can be, you know, happy all the time. Setting all that aside, since it's all speculation anyway, and all this is speculation, we're talking about, you know, how do you view the world? Is it according to what you would like to see, or what you think is the best for the whole? And that's kind of what I was mentioning here at the beginning of this little clip. Only a life experience and wisdom can bring you a proper assessment of the situation you're in, right? In other words, being able to handle yourself means having all the facts. So we're never going to have them all, but at least having a large portion of them. So when I look around at my ideal society, such as, let's say, my old ideals, which would be, let's go back to nature, okay? I had to analyze that for years, you know, what does that mean, you know? What does it mean to live with nature, you know? And the more I dissected it, the more I asked myself, okay, what are the details of this living with nature? The more I realized it was just another unrealistic generalization of how people should be. Oh, we should just go back to respecting nature. That's not a solution, you know. That's not it's not a path. It's just an idea. And there are many people out there who respect nature and love nature and want to live with nature, but can't because of their current situation. But this straight fact is that hundreds of years ago, if something went wrong, if you felt like you didn't want to be part of society, you could go up into the hills and you could be a hermit, you could be a Buddhist, you could meditate in caves and be a monk and say, this is my spot. There are no places on earth like that anymore, at least not in the States, not where we live, not where the cities are, places are overpopulated and you cannot escape this web, this system. And so rather than trying to beat it or escape it, and rather than trying to pretend like it should be a certain way, we ask, what would be a realistic way based on how other people view the world? So by observing what's important to other people, I've learned so much more about what I think is important for the world. Realizing that not everybody has the same ideas, and that's the way it should be. Because the dominating truths will always shine through. The true natures will never be, they can be ridiculed by people by saying there is no natural law, there is no, there's nothing to life, that we're all just here by chance. That type of argument isn't even worth entertaining, because once you've moved beyond that idea that everything, and understood that everything is connected, and that there really is a system to it, it's not worth arguing. So we're using our energy to push what we think is true on others and saying, no, you're wrong, you're wrong, you're wrong. And I think that it's hard not to do that, because we want people to wake up and we want people to see themselves, we want people to see the world for what it is. But I think that we generalize people too much in thinking that, it's like whenever people lump everybody together and say, oh, they're just sheeple and people who watch TV, I find that counterproductive, and it can be even offensive to a lot of people, because the fact that a person watches television does not make them a zombie or a moron. We need to get past that, and there's so many fake attitudes out there. It seems like when people are pushing the, telling others what they shouldn't be doing or what they should be doing, they always do it with such an arrogant demeanor. And they say, well, if you don't do this, you're just an idiot. And who's going to listen to somebody who talks to them like that? Some people will, because there are those followers who just want to be talked down to. I hate to say that, but there are people who thrive on being talked down to. There are people who thrive on misery, people who thrive on chaos. Everybody has their little thing. What we have to do is instill values that show that there's more to gain in having integrity and being a good person than in any other field. There's more to gain in seeking philosophy and knowledge than satisfaction in any other realm of possibilities, because philosophy isn't just something that's just for a few people, or this is my specialty. It's something we all do. We ponder life, and it's something we're obligated to do. And I feel like I know why people get angry and point the finger and get upset about it, is because they see people and assume that people aren't doing what they're doing. Because, oh, they look at these zombies, they're going to work, oh, you're coming home and watching TV and doing the 9 to 5. So fucking what? That's society. I do all those things too. Am I an idiot? Maybe. But I think that the important thing is not what you do with whether you watch TV, whether you watch the news, or what affiliation you have with which religion or which political value. What matters is what you do with your time, and what are you thinking about. Maybe the television's on for distraction and a person's thinking about their life. So really, I'm just saying that we pick at each other's the things that other people do that we don't do. It's kind of like the guy who just quit smoking, and all of a sudden everybody else should quit smoking. So the person who's finally seen through this illusion wants everybody to see that. Meanwhile, we neglect the idea that some people, like myself, saw through the illusion a long time ago. When I was in my teen years is when I started to say, oh my God, this is not what life's about. We're not supposed to just take on some random career. It's not something that came as revelation later. It's something I grew and always had with me, and just assumed other people knew, that other people were aware of this. And as I got older, I realized, no, people are stupid. People are morons. So then I started getting, arrogant and spiteful towards people, saying, you're an idiot, you should spend your time doing this. And as I got older, I realized this is just counterproductive. If I want to make a difference, I have to do it myself, for myself. And that's where it all starts, with ourselves. And we put our put our best foot forward and really try a little bit harder. Do what we're going to do. Don't worry about what other people are doing. It's none of our business. Unless they're doing something that's harming other people or themselves. But even harming themselves is kind of is that our business or not? Some people are self-destructive. Some people are socially destructive. One might say if you're self-destructive, go for it. But, since we are all one, it lends a certain... It's kind of like having one of your organs fighting against itself, if we're all cells. Okay, so, if I have to compare metaphorically, humans with the world, I would say that the way I consider, and this is only if you believe in the Gaian hypothesis, that the Earth is actually a living organism, which I do, completely. And it's one of the few things that I actually really have a firm belief in. And belief meaning almost like a faith, in the sense that you can never know for sure about something, because you can't really prove it. You can only observe the details of it. And while I'm reluctant to be a faith-based person, you have to have some beliefs, right? I believe that the Earth is an organism, and we are the cells within that organism, or some of the cells. And the humans make up these particular aspects of it. Call it an organ, if you will. And so we have... how was I going to put that? Like if you think about when the body goes into, we get a virus or get a cold, the body sends in antibodies and we attack the cold. We destroy the cells that are causing problems. So when you look at this, metaphorically, archetypally towards society, if you were to take that fractal pattern and move it up to the Earth scale, then you have us as individual cells on the Earth. And when people cause problems, what do we do? And this is where it gets very personal for people, because this is really the crux, the root of the whole conversation here is discussion, I guess. Not even a discussion, it's a, what do you call it, a lecture? Anyway, the point of this whole video is that we like to view things very simply, as if, well, people should just live the way they want to live. And that just doesn't work. It doesn't work because when you analyze what becomes of that, when we allow people to live with the way they want to live, with no interference, then people begin taking advantage. Imagine if we didn't put thieves in jail, because we say, well, that's his right. Now we could take it to a different level and say, okay, well, a person only gets in trouble or only gets arrested or punished if they harm another person. And then we get into these details and about, was this done on purpose? Was this manslaughter or murder? Was it accidental? And really, it's difficult to say. Well, I guess what I'm saying is that it's hard for us to say that people should just be free, because freedom is not the ability. And I hate to quote Manly Hall because he always said this: freedom is not the right to do as we please. That's how he's always put it. It's such a basic fact that freedom should not be the right to do as we please, but it's the right to do as we should. And when our freedoms are impinged on by, say, the government, it's not always really a freedom. Sometimes it's more of, the freedoms that we do have, we miss, like the freedom to think what we want to think, and to make the decision to see a situation differently, to make the decision to not be affected by certain events or people. However, we're forced to reckon with the fact that there are people who are in charge. So they need to be punished, just like a bad cell. So one rogue cell doesn't necessarily cause too many problems in the body, but if it's a major cell within a major organ and it reproduces, then you have a problem. Same thing happens with people. Say political offices, and they spread their greed and their arrogance and their ignorance. And I think that really most of this is based on ignorance. I would say that 90% of the world's problems are based on ignorance, if you consider that ignorance means being ignorant or ignoring the facts, being unaware of the facts. And I think most of us are, to one degree or another. I considered myself a pretty rounded person as a kid, but as I've gotten older, I've realized I was an arrogant little bastard. I thought I was, I thought I was this cool person that had it figured out, and I wasn't. So today, in these days, I don't think that I have it figured out at all, because I know that tomorrow I'm going to look back on myself today and say, shit, those ideals were messed up. But my deepest convictions are always going to resonate with me, and they always have. Honesty, truth, fairness, not stealing. I've become too honest. I was at Fred Meyer the other day, and I had one of their baskets, and I threw it in the car, and then I was like, wait, got back out of the car. I was like, I can't take that. Took the basket, put it in a cart, I wouldn't even, I can't even bring myself to take a basket. It's and I needed it for something. It's oh, that'd be cool for this or that. When I was a kid, I used to steal everything from grocery stores. I just load up my backpacks. And my justification was, well, it's a corporation. I would never steal from a friend or a person, but I'll steal from a corporation because blah, blah, blah. Fill in the excuse here. And I think this is what we all do, is we justify anything that we do we shouldn't be doing. When I fulfill my bad habits, sometimes I find myself still justifying them. So we're always going to have a little bit of justification, a little bit of arrogance. Our little primal mind's going to kick in. But all in all, I think that the ideal society is really here, if we make a few changes, you see? There are a few major changes to make, but really think about it for a while. How many things are really wrong with society? And not the speculation or the few people, the 1 in a billion people who are trying to, who really run the show, or setting aside the small problems, If we wanted to make those elite people a small problem, they could be a small problem if we dealt with it. And one day we might. But somebody else will always fill that in, you see? It's just like terrorism. You take out the head and a new one will jump up in its place. It's the fucking Hydra. Pardon my language, but everything is a fucking Hydra. Everything. Because society has molded into the archetype of society, you see? It's not wrong, or it doesn't need to necessarily be different. Just a few little things need to be adjusted. It's like an engine that's not running because the air filter's dirty. A few little tune-ups, boom, a new spark plug, good to go. We have a lot of problems to deal with, don't get me wrong. We've got massive amounts of pollution and global warming, pumping out into the atmosphere and burning oil, but honestly we're starting to learn that our theories of how the environment would go, how greenhouse effect would take place, our projections aren't quite adding up. And we're starting to think that this Earth, this Gaia, regulates herself. And as the temperatures rise, she will accommodate that by changing weather patterns. Or perhaps by more cloud cover, to reflect light. Or perhaps the magnetic field will start to boost back up. I don't know the details. These are big questions, and these are huge scientific questions. But it seems to be that the Earth can regulate itself and keep a consistent temperature. It's like it has its own climate controller on it. We can't use this as an excuse to keep doing the things we're doing. But individuals want to make a difference. Very few people are proud to drive a big noisy, loud polluting truck anymore. Very few people are proud to just throw their recycling in the garbage or even care. People have conscience. But this has only taken place over a couple decades. I hope you know where I'm going with this. We think that everybody should be awake. The fact is, this is like the first 2 seconds of being awake. When we look at these 200,000 years of evolution and millions of years, but a couple 100,000 years of conscious evolution and only about 100 years of technology. We've become overwhelmed. We're babies. And we're just learning how to play with these new toys, these new ideas. It's a tough one, It's a really tough one. So I think that in a sense, everything's coming to a head, that we're getting to this point where there may be this event, this something that happens, but we can't wait for something to happen. We have to make it happen. I think that it's going to be a gradual process. And when we look at it based on our lives, it's easy to say this is taking forever. But isn't that pretty arrogant of us? Egotistical? It's just like the folks who think that the end of the world's going to come in their generation. It's such a common thing. Every century, it's the end of the world. And, I bought into that in the 90s, let's say, when I started learning about 2012 and all these things, and I got really into it, and I realized that it's an approach to hoping that the shit will hit the fan to end it for us, so we don't have to deal with it. And we're going to have to deal with it, it's starting to look like. So, if we were to just make a few changes, alter the way of thinking, our children will pick up on that. You don't think the way that your parents thought, do you? And your kids aren't going to think the way that you think. So just remember that the mistakes we made, the mistakes our parents made, let's say, the things they didn't know in my generation, their white picket fences growing up in the 50s and 60s, hunky-dory, everything's great. Those times are over, and our generation is frustrated with them, with the older generation, for wasting so much time. But we don't blame them. They didn't know better. And likewise, just remember that if you have kids, don't try to instill your old values on them, because they're going to be way smarter than you are. My kids know what's right and what's wrong. I don't have to, push that on them and tell them what to do, how to get a job and run in society. They just do what they're going to do. I instill the values as best I know how, and then they do what they're going to do. Because with that value base, a person can go any direction. It's just knowing that you have the capacity, the ability to do anything you want and be part of anything you want if you just have the true want and desire to do it. I've looked at my life and said, why don't I have, why didn't I ever get rich, And I thought, well, I never wanted to. I never told myself to. I just never really cared about money. It didn't mean much. But, why didn't I do this with the business or that? Well, it wasn't my passion. It's not what I was into, You just don't look back on life and say, well, this is what we should have done, okay? And likewise, you take that metaphor to society, and it's the same exact way. The individual looks back at his life and says, oh, I could have done this, should have done that. And then we look back and say, oh, our parents should have done this, and our ancestors should have done that. Some people take it the opposite direction and romanticize history as if all these other cultures had it made. And that's another funny one to me, is that the people say, we need to get back to the way, that the ancients lived. Well, sure, bloodletting and beheading and trepanation. We've come a long way. And you have to remember that all ancient societies had order, and they were only order through power and control. It's just like it is today. That's never changed. I would never romanticize ancient cultures because they were as clueless as we are. They may have been slightly closer to the earth, but that's only because they didn't have buildings, they were forced to work with earth materials and to understand the plants. They couldn't just rely on everybody else to package and give it to them. That's the thing. And so I think that if we're all starting to get back to that, but here's the big problem, is that there's no way for the whole world to go back to wildcrafting and hunting, because there's not enough animals, there's not enough land. In order to feed the world, we have to farm on farmland, and we have to We don't have to harvest meat, but the way we have it set up right now, that's pretty much our only option for a lot of people. It's a big, confusing world with a lot of details. And I think personally that people get way too caught up in the trivialities and the smaller details instead of stepping back and looking at the big picture. I do it too. We all do it. You get caught up in a conversation and the next thing you know you're talking fucking semantics, the definition of a word or something, or, and I ask myself, it's like I asked, somebody talked about the normal life and I left a comment there. I was like, well, which is normal? They said they want to go out and do this and that and enjoy their life, but at the same time, they're doing what society wants them to do, and they say that they talked about the word normal. Anyway, I said, well, what is normal? Because normal to me is not the state of following suit with society, okay? Because normal is the norm, of course. So by definition, if you were defining normal as being a human, only relating to humans, then you would say, okay, so being normal is having a 9-to-5 job, wearing normal clothes, having a house, all these things, a mortgage. That's normal. But how dare we base normal on what humans are doing? Because we're not doing the right things. So we take normal out and look at the world and say, what is normal? And what do animals do? How do they run? And they have alphas. They have packs. They defend themselves. They get into spats. They argue. They do all these different things that we can observe. And not just the animals, it's the plants. The plants share, but they don't put up with each other's shit. They've got their own defenses. They've evolved to communicate with us through smells, terpenes, compounds and alkaloids, cannabinoids. These are the language of the plants. And I guess just observing all these different structures within nature is a much better way to determine what is normal. Because the normal state to me is philosophy. It's contemplation. But that's the human side of it. That's based on the human, because you have to have two normals, one based on human consciousness because it's something that's set apart from the animal kingdom. But at the same time, if we think of the Gaian hypothesis, then the animal kingdom and the plant kingdoms are conscious. So it's kind of a tough one, but I think we're all learning together. We're doing okay. And I guess if I could sum this all up in a couple sentences, what I'd really like to see is more people changing their mind about how they view the world. Not becoming passive and letting people trample on them. Not saying, oh well, everything's all love. Being realistic. That is normal. Seeing the world for what it really is. Not what we think it should be. Not what it might be or what it was. But what it is right now. And ask ourselves, what can we do to improve it? And ourselves. For what it's worth, Carpo out.